Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed. It's finally happening. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah will both be interrogated in the Bezek corruption case tomorrow, known as Case 4000. The questioning comes just 1 day before the Israeli leader is set to embark on a week-long diplomatic trip to the United States. Case 4000 involves suspicions that Shaul Elovich, the owner of the Israeli news site Walla, ordered positive coverage for the prime minister and his family, all in exchange for better benefits for his other telecommunications company Bezek. Netanyahu and his wife will reportedly be interrogated at the same time but in separate spaces. Israel's Channel 10 News has just released a text message sent by Sarah Netanyahu to Iris Elovich, Shaul's wife, blasting coverage of her family on Walla and demanding an immediate change. You're killing us, you're slaughtering us, you're destroying the state. What type of site is this? Change this, do something with this. You're the owners of the site. This should happen quickly. The Prime Minister himself is being questioned under caution in the case, which marks him as a possible suspect, and he is also expected to testify in a separate probe known as Case 3000. That case involves suspected corruption in the multi-billion shekel purchase of submarines and other naval boats from a German shipbuilder. Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing in all of the various corruption cases swirling around him and is accusing the media of taking part in a witch hunt against his family. Now, as the situation between Israel and Iran degrades further and further, Iran is taking its hateful rhetoric another step forward. The hardline Islamic regime has just announced an open call for art and media entries to be featured in its first ever Hourglass Festival, a festival that's basically celebrating the destruction of Israel. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on this. So tell us a little bit about this festival.
So it's basically an extension from a policy that was sort of started in 2015. The Iranian regime made a prediction that Israel would be destroyed, would not exist by 2040. Then in 2017, they came out with a countdown clock that they put prominently in the middle of Tehran, which also counted down to 2040, the supposed destruction of Israel. And so now they have the first international Hourglass Festival, counting down again the sands of time until Israel is destroyed. And it celebrates Israel's, quote, imminent collapse.
Now, what is the open call for art and media in this festival?
So basically the Islamic Republic is asking artists across the world to make entries for, first place winners in each category will win a cash prize up to $2,700. And, some of the subjects include, but are not limited to, the Quds occupier regime, i.e. Israel, will not survive the next 25 years. The Zionist child-killing regime. Israel, a fake racist and colonialist regime, and of course, one of my favorites, Israel, a cancerous tumor.
All right, and winners in each category are going to go home with a cash
they all
prize,
go home
right?
with some cash.
So is the public's, how's the public reacting to this festival? Is there support for this?
Yeah, you have to imagine that there is some, but thankfully it does appear to that the government is mostly pushing this, and actually we're even seeing a lot in the private sector and in the world of sports, for example, a lot of pushback against, this boycott that Iran has upheld.
There have been many Iranian athletes recently as well that have had to lose in order to avoid playing against Israelis, and a lot of Iranian nationals have come out against this.
Yeah, and actually, the head of Iran's wrestling federation, who was an Olympic gold medalist himself, Rasul Kadem, came out recently. He was essentially forced to retire to resign, and he said, our players and our athletes are paying the price for something that really they have no business doing. They're taking the dive or faking an illness, or some sort of injury in order to avoid playing Israel.
And there was also another wrestler who threw a match last year to avoid facing Israel in the next round.
That's right, Mashiami, and he was banned from the sport for 6 months. His coach was banned for 2 years. So again, there's Kadem is basically, again, he's saying to Iran, either get rid of the boycott entirely or be open about it and face whatever consequences come from that.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Aaron. It's happening. The U.S. State Department has just announced that it will be moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem starting as early as May of 2018. You heard me right. The deadline has been moved up to May 14th, just in time to coincide with the 70th anniversary of Israel declaring independence. At first, the embassy will operate out of the United States' current consular premises in southern Jerusalem, a compound that currently houses the operations of the city's U.S. Consulate General. In the beginning, the site will host the ambassador and a small team, and the consular employees based in Jerusalem will be considered employees of the embassy. A ribbon-cutting ceremony is set to be held in mid-May in honor of the move, and according to Israeli media, it may even be held on May 14th, Israel's Independence Day. The Israeli Prime Minister is celebrating the entire affair, which marks a significant acceleration in the White House's plans.
This is a great moment for the State of Israel. President Trump's decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem will make our Independence Day celebrations even happier. Thank you, President Trump.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence had previously said the embassy would open by the end of 2019, a promise made by the U.S. president on December 6 when he also officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The date of the move is mainly seen as symbolic because the logistics of a permanent relocation will frankly take much longer. In fact, most of the embassy staff will continue to work from Tel Aviv during the early stages of the move. The expansion may see the United States taking over a property adjacent to the facility it currently has in Jerusalem. But one thing's for sure, the White House is planning to build a totally new embassy in the city. Republican Jewish megadonor Sheldon Adelson has offered to cover the costs of at least part of the embassy, but the Trump administration is still considering the legality of accepting private donations. Church leaders in Jerusalem have closed up the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, all in a protest of a new Israeli policy that would allow Israel to confiscate land sold by churches to private investors since 2010, and also freeze their assets until they cough up unpaid taxes. Tourists in Jerusalem are disappointed, to say the least.
Yeah, I've been especially to see the Holy Church, and I'm quite disappointed because I did not know that it was going to be closed, and I came to Jerusalem mainly to see that church, which is like the root of Christian for us. So.
Well, the Knesset has now postponed a debate over the bill in response to the protest. The legislation was pushed forward by the Kulanu Knesset member Rachel Azaria, who says she's seeking to protect hundreds of Israelis in Jerusalem whose homes are on land that until recently was owned and leased to them by the churches, or more specifically, the Greek Orthodox Church. Most of these people are living on church land under 99-year contracts that were signed in the 1950s between the church and the state. When the contracts run out, they're supposed to either extend or the buildings will revert back to the church. But here's the problem. In recent years, the Greek Orthodox Church has been selling the real estate to private investors to erase massive debts. In other words, hundreds of people could soon be without homes.
אין לנו שום עניין לגעת בשום קרקע שבבעלות הכנסייה. אבל לא יכול להיות שזה מה שיזמים יעשו ברגע שהם קונים את הקרקע. הווה אומר הצעת החוק היא מול היזמים ולא מול הכנסייה.
Under the new proposed policy, Israel would seize control of that land. But the churches consider this an assault on their rights to buy and sell their one and only resource, investment properties.
This reminds us all laws of a similar nature which were enacted against the Jews during the dark periods in Europe. This systematic and unprecedented attack against Christians in the Holy Land severely violates the most basic anti-war and sovereign rights.
The Israeli government is also demanding millions of shekels in back taxes to Jerusalem, and the city's mayor says it isn't fair that businesses on church property have traditionally been exempt from paying taxes. Lawyers for the Greek Orthodox Patriarch say a lien has been placed on the church's assets due to an unpaid debt of $8.7 million. Local churches say the charges are illegitimate, and tourists are outraged.
All over the world that I have traveled, I've never heard of any church paying taxes anywhere. So why is this new? What's this new idea?
For now, the doors of the Holy Church of the Sepulchre remain closed in protest. Orthodox, Christian, and Catholic tourists alike believe it to be the place where Jesus was crucified, buried, and resurrected. But they're just going to have to wait for this scandal to blow over until they'll finally get the chance to visit. Palestinian groups are allegedly calling for clashes with Israeli soldiers and settlers next Friday as part of a day of, quote, popular rage. The violence is supposed to be a form of protesting the U.S. administration's decision to not only recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but to also relocate its embassy to the city. Representatives of the Palestinian National and Islamic forces reportedly met up in Ramallah to discuss where to initiate clashes. They're calling on Palestinians to gather at, quote, all points of friction, including settlements and military checkpoints. They're also calling on Arabs and Muslims around the world to stage similar protests against American policy. The U.S. State Department has just announced that the U.S. Embassy will be moved on May 14th from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, just in time for the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence. The move has Palestinian leadership fuming, calling on the PLO bodies to suspend all relations with Israel and to boycott all American delegations visiting the West Bank. Last week, a U.S. delegation of New York council members and civil society groups were attacked by Palestinian protesters with eggs when they attempted to visit the Palestinian Center for Policy and Research in Ramallah. The last surviving Christian Poles who helped Jews during the Holocaust are speaking out to Polish and Israeli authorities in order to prevent even more of a diplomatic crisis. Israel and Poland have been fighting ever since Poland passed a new law that criminalizes people who say that the Polish nation was complicit in the Holocaust. Now, 50 Poles who risked their own lives for Jews have written an open letter to the Polish and Israeli governments. They consider themselves to be the last survivors of more than 6,700 Poles who were recognized by Israel as righteous of the nations, hiding Jews from the occupying German forces. The remaining survivors mostly assisted their parents in sheltering Jewish people and say they oppose divisions between Poles and Jews, calling for a future based on friendship, solidarity, and truth. The Polish Prime Minister is thanking them for standing up, and Polish officials insist that their new law won't be used against anyone who speaks the truth. Rather, it will only target those who try to defame Poland with lies. Well, Israel is still maintaining that the law is an attempt to whitewash the actions of Poles who killed Jewish people during World War II. There's been a resurgence of anti-Semitism in the Polish public amid the crisis, and Poland's Jewish community has expressed much fear. It looks like the White House is getting the ball rolling on transferring the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. An American delegation is set to land in Israel next week to coordinate the move. The delegation is expected to consist of lawyers, logistical staff, diplomats, and engineers who will together lay the groundwork for the country's embassy to be moved to a consular affairs building in southern Jerusalem. The State Department is planning the official move for May 14th, just in time to coincide with Israel's 70th Independence Day. But because the process will take much more time, for now the U.S. will be converting a consulate building in Jerusalem's residential Arnona neighborhood as a temporary solution. Officials initially said it would take 6 years to construct a new embassy, but the White House has moved up the date by promising to simply convert the current Jerusalem compound. The United States originally asked Jerusalem to provide a large plot of land to build a new embassy, but we're told that there just wasn't any plot in Jerusalem that met U.S. security requirements. The White House had reportedly been seeking a 25-acre plot with no other buildings or factories in the immediate vicinity. Now the U.S. is expected to demolish the former Diplomat Hotel located next to the Jerusalem consulate and build a new embassy in its place. White House aide and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner is the topic of major speculations this week, as the White House reports that Kushner's security clearance has now been downgraded. This also comes just at the heels of Kushner's communications director Josh Raffel stepping down for family obligations in New York. ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story. Now, Aaron, Kushner has been working for a year now on a special clearance through President Trump. Yeah. Couldn't Trump just extend it? Didn't he have the ability to do that himself?
So yes, the answer to that is yes. He could use his executive authority to just give Kushner and in fact anybody else access to whatever secret clearance, documents that he wanted to show them privately. That being said, he did indicate earlier that he would not interfere with Kelly's assessment, with the assessment of his clearance. But of course, that was before the answer came out.
Right. So now, what about any actual potentials for leaks, though? Because if Kushner's clearance was downgraded, then some reason must have been found, right? There must have been something.
So there wasn't any specific reason given, but there was a potential for a leak. in top secret, information, particularly a new report that just came out that shows at least 4 different countries had been looking at ways to leverage positions over Kushner.
Well, I can guess one of those countries, but what are the countries?
Right. So there's Israel, there's the United Arab Emirates, there is China, and there was Mexico, and it's worth being said that none of them, there's no evidence to show that any of these countries acted on this information, but that they were compiling ways to potentially use Jared Kushner to influence United States policy. They were going to go through his financial dealings, his lack of experience, and things like that.
Right. I mean, he's a young man. All right. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, here's some very exciting news for activists and humanitarians alike. Israel has agreed to hold off deporting almost 2,000 African asylum seekers after reaching a deal with Canada. 1,845 African asylum seekers are currently waiting for resettlement in Canada, and Israel has agreed to hold off deporting them until that happens. Canadian immigration officials claim that they've just inked the last-minute deal with Israel, meaning this group of asylum seekers also won't face jail time. That's good news for about 10% of the total number of asylum seekers that could be deported under the first stage of Israel's deportation campaign. Israel is home to about 38,000 asylum seekers and is planning on deporting the first round of unmarried males to Rwanda or Uganda by March. If they refuse, they will be jailed indefinitely in Israel, according to the new government policy. The Africans come from Eritrea and Sudan and say they fled from war, genocide, and a slave army for freedom here in Israel. The Israeli government, however, refers to them as so-called illegal infiltrators or economic migrants, claiming the Jewish state has no legal obligation to accept them. In recent weeks, Israelis from across the country have been protesting Israel's plan to deport the asylum seekers, but a recent poll by the Israeli Democracy Institute found that 2/3 of the public supports their planned expulsion. There's a major problem with the government's plan, however. Prison authorities are skeptical that they will be able to process and hold the 15,000 to 20,000 asylum seekers that are expected to be jailed. All right, it looks like Poland is caving into Israeli pressure. The Polish government has just announced that it will delay the implementation of its controversial Holocaust law. The outrageous legislation would not only make it illegal to say that Poland was complicit in the Holocaust, but would also fine or imprison people who referred to Nazi death camps in Poland like Auschwitz as Polish death camps. When the law was passed earlier this month, Israel immediately fought back, accusing the Polish government of rewriting history and even denying the reality of the Holocaust. Now, a Polish delegation is expected to arrive in Israel over the next week to try and reach an agreement with Israel over the future of the legislation. The entire affair has created a deep rift in Polish-Israeli relations, and Poland claims that because of the Israeli pressure, the law will not be implemented before Poland's constitutional tribunal reviews the issue. Well, there may be some very good news for Israelis who are planning to travel to the United States. The entire U.S. Senate is calling for Israel to be added to the expedited screening program. And if that happens, Israelis will be able to quickly enter the United States via self-service kiosks at airports. All 100 U.S. senators have reportedly signed a letter calling for the move in recognition of the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence, and of course, flourishing diplomatic relations between the two countries. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Global Entry Program already enables travelers from certain countries to more quickly enter the United States. To participate, visitors are required to provide biographical and travel information, including their fingerprints, and pay a $100 fee every 5 years. The senators believe adding Israel to this program would not only provide Israelis with a smoother visit to the U.S., but would also enhance bilateral law enforcement cooperation. Today, about 1.4 million travelers are enrolled in the program from 14 different countries, including Argentina, Australia, Canada, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Israel has participated in a limited experiment with global entry since 2012, but right now, Israelis unfortunately do not enjoy full membership. All right, guys, it is finally happening. The release date for season 2 of the hit Israeli series Fauda on Netflix has just gone public, and I know exactly how I'm going to be spending this spring. The new season will be going live on Netflix on May 24th at midnight in all of the countries where the streaming service is available. Well, except for in France and Israel. If you've been living under a rock and somehow have missed this hit series, the show is about an elite Israeli undercover commando unit that's operating in the West Bank. The entire series was written by the Israeli veteran journalist Avi Issacharov and the show's lead actor Lior Raz, and centers on a top Israeli agent who comes out of a retirement to hunt for a Palestinian militant that he thought he'd killed. The entire show is in both Arabic and Hebrew, and interestingly, it's beloved by both Israelis and Palestinians alike. After all, they can agree on good TV. Fauda has been dubbed the Wire of the West Bank, showing the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the point where the viewer just doesn't know how to feel anymore. So if you still aren't convinced that you should watch this series, do it anyway, and then go and get some help. All right, up now we have ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh with this week's Top 5.
The Holy Land is home to more museums per capita than anywhere else in the world, with over 230 museums and counting. I'm here to give you guys the top 5 must-see museums in Israel. At number 1, we have the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, ranked among the world's leading art and archaeology museums, housing over 500,000 objects, including the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. Founded back in 1965, the Israel Museum went through a massive $100 million renovation back in 2009 and is now considered the largest cultural institution in Israel. Definitely should be your first stop. Second on our list is the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. Founded back in 1932, this museum houses pieces from some of Israel's best artists, and who can forget some of the world masters such as Vincent van Gogh and Pablo Picasso pieces can also be found here. So if you're already visiting the city that never sleeps, there's no excuse not to check out the Museum of Art. Third on our list is the Madha Tech Museum, Israel's national museum of science, technology, and space, located in the city of Haifa. This is definitely a place to enjoy and learn at the same time. The museum prides itself on its hands-on, interactive exhibits and is the perfect place to explore, experience, and discover, all while having a good time. Fourth on our list, and definitely most important, is the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. More than 1 million visitors a year walk through this museum in an effort to learn more about the Holocaust. The exhibits include authentic film footage, personal interviews with survivors, personal items, and tons of emotional and educational information. Not a single person leaves Yad Vashem with dried eyes. Last on our list, the Design Museum Holon in the city of Holon. The museum itself opened not long ago in 2010 and is already recognized as one of the world's leading museums of design and contemporary culture. The building itself is considered a work of art and was designed by Israeli architect Ran Arad. Worth heading there for all the latest and most updated exhibits. And that's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.